Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how can you become an exceptional leader? So often on the podcast, we talk about our leadership and how our communication can fuel our leadership, but not often enough do we talk about the power of coaching. And so often we can unlock different levels of our leadership through the power of coaching. Well, I'm so excited today because we're diving deep into this question with an incredible leader who's written an incredible book called Coaching: The Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership. She is a seasoned executive coach. She works with universities all around the globe. She's helped leaders from all corners navigate the complexities of business and leadership. And so if you're interested, if you're ready to learn how coaching can transform your leadership journey and strengthen your relationships, bring out the best in your team, you're not going to want to miss this conversation. It is my honor to welcome Ruchira Chaudhary to the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you, Jason. It is my privilege and my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, you are our first guest in Singapore, so this is very exciting.
Great.
Absolutely. We've had guests from all around the globe, and this is the first one. So I've not made it to Singapore yet. I think the closest is Shanghai. I've been, on that that side, but looking forward to at some point getting over that way.
Well, this is a good start, right?
Love
Just
it.
having me from this.
Yes, this
Yeah,
is a
but
great start. Well, hey, before we hop into this conversation, why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit more about your story, who you are, what you do, what got you to this place?
this could take a really long time, but I'm going to try and make it really snappy. We have much to go through in the next
Yes.
20 minutes. So, if you look back at my career, and there's LinkedIn, there are many other public forums where you can check that out. You can call it a mishmash of many things, or you could just say I've had a very eclectic career path. I've been, I started my life out in advertising. And for the life of me, I didn't think I'd switch tracks. I then went on to do HR consulting for a few years at an organization called Hewitt, which is now Aon, one of the largest HR consultings in the world. And post that, I joined the Tata Group in India. They were bringing in their IPO. I didn't know the first thing about an IPO.
Mm,
So fascinating at many levels, being part of one of India's largest conglomerates and being part of something as prestigious as that, an IPO that was oversubscribed 7.7 times. That was a huge life lesson for me as well. I'd come from this American consulting background, and then I joined a fairly conventional, steeped in conventional organization, and yet it taught me so much about the culture, the nuances, and working in India. I'd largely not worked in India. Post that, I joined my spouse in the Middle East. It's a pattern in my life, and a lot of people will tell you that this is classic. I always whinge and moan and groan every time he leaves for a different place because I feel he's unsettling me. And then, ironically, once I join him, and after continuing to whinge and moan for a little while, I seem to find my feet and settle down. And it's when it's time for him to leave for the next assignment, I stay back.
mm,
And we've done it a few times. So he was at Standard Chartered. He moved to Doha. I stayed back in India. I was part of the IPO team. Eventually joined him, and then Doha, of all the places, became it was one of the most interesting experiences in my career graph because the country was evolving, and I think I evolved in many ways. HR or transformation was at a very nascent stage. So in many ways, a lot of the work that I did, I truly felt that I was adding value
mm.
to the organization, and in the process, of course, I added value to me. Of course, sure enough, the Doha chapter ended for my spouse, and he moved to Singapore. And then I stayed back because, as you do, because I was in the throes of this big transformation and change. Eventually, I did join him. I usually do with a lag. And a few months after joining him, the organization Qatar Telecom, then now called Ooredoo, it was Qatar's sole telecom provider.
Mm.
Uh, Vodafone was coming in, there was competition, and they had done a massive acquisition. So the CEO, who I respect very, very much even now, he called me to say that they would love for me to come and lead the post-merger integration for them. So I said to him, Dr. Nasir, I live in Singapore now. He said, that's okay, get on a flight. We'll make sure you're with us every week. And so that was sort of defined my next 2 years. I was a resident in Singapore, but I took a flight out every Sunday um,
Wow.
to Doha, and then I would come back home for the weekend. And the weekend there essentially meant Thursday night. So I spent Friday and Saturday at home. And sometimes I needed to leave earlier because they worked Sundays then, and we had board meetings, etc. So it was a bit of a joke. I said this was my life BC before child. A lot of so, so yeah, I did that for 2 years. It's really exciting because the acquisition was across 10 countries. So Algeria, Tunisia, Dubai, Doha, which was the headquarters. I didn't go to Israel, but yeah, there was a whole bunch of, Kuwait. So that was exciting. Maldives was the most exciting bit, I have to admit. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I think it was time to finally live in one place. I had a lot of people telling me that this isn't healthy for you, which is true. Bio-clock was ticking away. All of those good things were happening around me. You know, don't come from a conventional family, but by now everybody else had started getting a bit edgy. So yes, I stayed. Then lived in Singapore for a little while and went back to business school because I just felt it was the right time for me. And I went back to the University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, where I majored in where I have a concentration in strategy and private equity. I studied there, which is unusual given my background because the business school that I went to was very financially skewed. So we produce fabulous CFOs, investment bankers,
Mm.
uh, private equity guys, but not too many folks who understand people. And
Mhm.
then they try and marry it with the harder stuff like strategy and private equity and game theory, etc. So that was my journey. And then I joined a large insurer here in APAC. I was head of transformation with them. And post that, I decided that I had enough of full time roles in any organization and I wanted to work on my terms. So, what is now really fashionable, what we call knowledge working gig space or fractional roles, I embraced that many, many moons ago in 2015. I started doing interim consulting advisory roles for organizations. I would go in for 6 months, 8 months. Um, I had a change agenda. I would work with them. And around the same time, University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, also approached me to be the resident executive coach. Now, I could be flattered, but truly I wasn't because they just needed somebody who was one of them and who understood the school and understood people and understood all the hard metrics. So it was an experiment, the academia and the coaching piece. Let's just say the experiment was successful. Singapore is a little village, and everybody finds out about you.
Mm.
So you didn't have too many coaches with my background, and the fact that uh, I'd had corporate roles in the past. So I think it sort of lent itself really well to me being able to work with leaders, to be able to understand their trials and tribulations, and also marry a lot of their classroom learnings. If you've learned negotiation or marketing or strategy, and I went to the same classes. So I think it started out very positively, and that sort of set the tone for the last many years. So yeah, I have to complete this really long story. The long story ends with me writing the book, and by now I've become a coach. I didn't think I would become one. I didn't know the first thing about coaching, but by now I've become a coach. And my spouse did this to me again, and he went on an assignment to India, which is where I'm from, but I didn't anticipate that this would happen at this juncture. So we went back to India for a few years. And again, I was whinging and moaning and groaning and coming back to Singapore and Asia. It so happened that a friend said that, you teach a class on leader as coach. You coach senior leaders. Write for us. So this is a mainstream business magazine,
Mm.
business paper in India. And I started writing for them. And I wrote a column for them called The Coaching Conundrum. That column I think in many ways, it took me by surprise by how many people wrote to me saying they loved it and it was their aha moment, and how every leader should be that coach that takes others along on the journey. And Penguin saw that column. So the business editor approached me and they said they loved the voice. It was really fresh. The topic was fresh. There were enough leadership books in the market and there were enough coaching books in the market. But this was at the cross section of leadership and coaching. And the rest, as I say, is history. So they commissioned the book and they've commissioned another one. So that's it.
Wow.
Okay, long story.
No, absolutely fascinating and just amazing.
Um,
The years where you were trapped, I mean, you're hopping on a plane every Sunday, and was that an exhilarating time? Did it end up exhausting you? Was it a lot to
Initially,
learn? How to function as you're crossing time zones and everything.
I think initially it was exhilarating, as you said. As I think it's a great adjective. It was flattering because it sort of selected me, and I was, an Asian woman who was going back and forth. And when I'd started working in Qatar or in the Middle East during my consulting days, actually, you didn't see too many of them. And remember, I was Indian. They still needed to get me a visa, and it wasn't
Right.
easy. But they were clear they wanted me, right? And they were willing to pull out all stops to have me. So I think that itself, I was really flattered. But of course, I was plagued by the imposter syndrome as well. What if I get outed? What if I can't sort of make this work? It was a huge assignment for me, and I hadn't been expecting it. But I think in their mind, they trusted me. I was one of them. I also learned some Arabic by then. And I was just become a part of that organization. I'd embraced it, and I think we'd built these reservoirs of trust with the CEO, with the head of
Yep.
HR. They're all locals, Qataris, right? And they knew I understood the nuances of the culture, and I was one of them. Not really, but clearly they felt I was, and for me that was a real high.
Mm,
And yeah, so my spouse said, "Yeah, go ahead." And I said this would be sweet before child days. So, but yes, eventually it did get very exhausting. It took a toll on my health.
sure.
It got hard in many ways. I mean, there were times when my spouse would say, "Would you like to just like show up for my dinner and dance?" Because they don't think I'm married. I mean, I've
Right.
lived in Singapore and never they don't see my spouse. But apart from the social bit, living in a country and not really integrating or having a social life, that was hard. But I think it, being on a plane every week uh, just is exhausting at many levels.
Sure.
the best the best times were being going to Algeria because no matter what nationality you are, it takes 2 weeks to get your visa because Singapore doesn't have a high population. So you have to go to Indonesia. And those are the nicest times because you would sit pretty and say, "Okay, I'm
Sure.
waiting for my passport." So, but yeah, it was hard. But I loved every minute. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Boy, I love that. I love that. Well, let's jump into your book because I mean, you've poured your heart and soul. You've taken all of these years of such incredible experience pouring into leaders and coaching them. Sorry, one second. Go on. Had a little. My 10-year-old woke up and opened a door and allowed our family
Right.
cat in. So I will edit that little portion out. So I will start that
Oh,
portion over.
no, I have a dog and a child. The child is a teenager, so now he does not do that anymore. But we've had these moments.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, let's dive into your book. You've poured years of your amazing experience in leading leaders into it. And so, right off the bat, I mean, let's talk about this kind of uncommon leadership. What does that mean to you? And how is coaching the key to achieving it?
Right. So, as I said to you earlier, this book doesn't is not a book that helps you become a leader.
Mm,
The assumption is you're already a leader, and as I've defined it, leaders can come from anywhere. You
yes.
don't have to have huge teams or fancy titles. Everybody's a leader, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're setting up your gig. It's you're a I don't know, yoga studio manager. Anybody, right? Leadership comes from within, right? So the assumption is you're a good leader, but this book helps you find or helps you traverse the journey from being a good leader to an exceptional one, or a good leader to an uncommon one.
Mm,
And I describe how coaching, the act of enabling somebody, through a series of non-directive conversations, ensuring that you focus not on their just on their current performance but their future potential. That's the goal, and that's how I define coaching. That is the key that unlocks a code to uncommon leadership.
Mm.
The who leaders who recognize this are those that take people along on the journey. They understand that it's not about making those billions in revenue, but it's also about building your people.
Yep.
These people, when they elevate themselves, they take their people along with them. They take them higher. And I think the core message is that when you shine the light on somebody else, you shine even brighter. That's the
Ooh,
essence.
wow. Wow. So incredible. Which, for whatever reason, for many leaders, it seems like for a season in our leadership, we tend to shine the light on us first. And for whatever reason, we're climbing and trying to achieve. What do you think that's
Yeah.
true for most leaders? And then we get to a place where we realize we kind of have the aha moment. If that's true, what kind of causes that change in us?
You know, I have an entire chapter in the book. It's called Good Leaders, Bad Managers.
Mm,
It's a lot of research, many, many, many interviews. People start off by saying, my boss is not self assured. He or she worries that I'll shine brighter. And that was the most common answer. But honestly, we have to go beyond the obvious, right? There are many reasons why most leaders, most managers don't make good coaches. So HBR does this survey time fairly frequently, where they'll ask anybody who has people responsibility, um, "Are you a good coach?" Inevitably, most people will overestimate their ability to say yes. You ask the team the same question, and I think you know the answer. There's a big discrepancy because their people will not agree. Now, if you really look closely, yes, there's lack of self assurance. Yes, there is. Sometimes you can say, under the guise of, I don't have time, I don't have mind space. All of those are reasons. But the crux of it is most leaders or most managers do not know how to coach.
mm,
They've never been taught coaching, right? Through school and college, we have applauded those that provide answers, right? The kids that shone the brightest were the kids that had all the answers. So, in their mind, when they're coaching somebody, at least they're attempting to coach, they are simply telling people what to do, right? This is what made Ruchira really successful. She's a successful executive, and this is how you do it. This is how Jason does fabulous podcast. This is how you need to do it, right? So in that process, we forget that coaching is not about telling people. It's
mm,
not directive. Coaching is all about asking. It's about giving people the space and the time to think for themselves and come up with their solutions. They need to own the solution, not you. And and when you have 30 minutes in a really hectic sort of quarter and you want to spend time with your coachee or with your team member, you simply dump all that knowledge on them. You tell them
wow.
this is great. And remember, we've been always told that you have to solve people's problems for them. As managers, you need to give them answers.
Right.
People have problems, you give them answers. So we don't really step back. We don't have the time, but we also don't step back and give people that opportunity to think for themselves.
Wow. Do you think, in your experience and career, are there how often do you see companies that take the time to develop their managers so the managers know how to coach? Is that a rare training that happens, a rare transformation, or is it just, hey, we put you as a manager, you got to figure this out as you go?
It is changing, and interestingly, a lot of organizations now say that we want leaders that coach, and the likes of Unilever and Microsoft, they are setting the tone. I mean, Microsoft is an entire case study in the book. When Satya Nadella took on a really broken Microsoft, toxic work culture, people vowed to get each other. Oh, coached by role modeling, right? The first thing he did was listen to hundreds of people through the first 3 months, along with his
Mm,
head of HR, Kathleen Hogan. And he gave the same attention and focus to somebody who was a really senior leader or someone who was really down the value chain, right? And he listened, he learned, and then he led.
wow.
And as a result of that, they came up with a fabulous model where every leader is expected to be a coach. But that's not it. they measure you against that, right?
Wow.
So how do I know that someone's a great coach? They have metrics which will tell you that, did you build other leaders? How are your engagement scores? I don't know. I haven't gone that deep. But the bottom line is, remember, not everybody, firstly, knows how to coach or is a natural at it. So that's one
Right.
aspect. And even if they're willing to coach or they want to coach, um, not everybody is intrinsically motivated, right?
Right.
I may want to build the next line of leaders and I might want to leave a legacy behind, but you may not, right? We all are motivated by different things. But organizationally, if we truly want to, build a coaching culture, then we need to ensure that we build the systems around it, that we measure people around it. And then culturally also we have to infuse that, right? Which means you need to celebrate those that build others. You need to recognize them. You need to hire people that are more collaborative in nature, not just because they have a fabulous pedigree or they came from the best business schools. So organizations who are serious about building or embedding coaching into their culture, they need to start thinking about it beyond the training, as you said. You have to build a org-wide coaching mindset
Wow.
where everybody believes that building the next line of leaders is your responsibility.
Wow. Wow. Why do we, it seems, why do we achieve more? Why do we do better? Why do we hit our goals? From my perspective, at least, more rapidly when we do have that coach to when we're not. Like, why does it add so much power to leadership, even to our own, development plan? It seems so simple, but so many leaders fight against it for so long, and then finally we have that coach's voice, and we start to achieve more than we ever experienced. What you know, what's the secret for that?
I think you don't know what you don't know. To my mind, it's just right. A lot of people who get me as a coach, and again, I mean, to completely candid, a lot of times the organizations ask them to get coached. And I have a really clear sort of mandate on this. I never will go into an engagement with somebody unless we've spent the first 20, 30 minutes. uh, it's always gratis, always on me,
Mm.
because they need to, it has to be the right chemistry, and they need to believe that they can be vulnerable in front of their coach, i.e. me, right? In
Yep.
order to build those reservoirs of trust. And if the first 30 minutes doesn't go anywhere, or I feel that this has been imposed upon the individual, I also know that he or she will not gain very much from the coaching
Mm.
exercise. So you're right. I mean, this thing is sometimes, and sometimes I have leaders who are really honest, and they said, "Listen, I love the idea of getting coached, but I don't know how will it work. Practically, tell me more about it." And these are APAC heads, these are CEOs, who run regions. These are senior functional leaders. I think we're evolving, but we've never truly understood that a coach is not there to provide the answers, that a coach can facilitate those answers, but the
Wow.
answers lie inside you, right?
Right.
And, and I think we it's changing, it's evolving. There's a greater awareness, but and I think long-winded answer. You don't know what you don't know
Right.
till you experience it. Yeah.
Wow. Whoa, so powerful. Uh,
Yeah.
is each leader, especially as we coach them, do is there similar uh, transformation paths that we take, or is everything individualized? So if I'm a coach and I'm working with a leader, are there some similar concepts and ideas that I'll work through with them, and then I'll help develop kind of an individual plan, or is
Yeah.
it the same across the board?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I think we need to think of it, and we need to slice it into a few parts, right?
Mm,
Um, think of the coaching. The goal of coaching should be making the person the best he or she could ever be, right?
mm,
You want to make that person the best version of himself or herself. What would be common to all of these coaching engagements is that you would work with them to articulate their goals. This is where I want to be, and of course, those, at least in my mind, those goals are not sacrosanct. They evolve, right? That's what your coach does. It's a sounding board, and the coach does really four things for you. It's my proprietary model, but that's also the crux of my book.
mm.
Um, and the model came to me very interestingly, since you have a 10-year-old and you'll appreciate it. Despite being, as you said, uh, a leading executive coach, as I was writing the book, I kind of struggled to articulate in simple terms what coaching does for somebody.
Mm,
or when you're being coached, what the benefit you receive. I mean, I could write fancy jargon like it untaps reservoirs of creativity, or it gives you return on your investment. And
sure.
yes, it does. What does it mean in practical terms, right? So I was sifting through it and I looked at HR journals and coaching journals. But my son was watching Kung Fu Panda for, I don't know, 10th time or something. And in this instance, I actually stood behind him and I saw parts of it. And I said, you know what, Master Shift was right. The answers lie inside you, right? That's what a coach does.
Yes.
So if I distill it, there are four things a good coach should do for you. And that's what you should expect when you get coached, right?
Wow.
The first must is clarity. Every leader that you will talk to say, my coach gave me clarity.
Mhm.
So I'm going to show you this in a second, the cover of my book, right? Hang on, I have to get this right. Okay. No, I'm not doing it right.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a big knot here. I'm not getting, yeah. There's a big knot here. And this knot is, these are our thoughts, right? Uh, when we have so much going on in our lives, there's white noise, there's work pressure, there's domestic pressures, there's life, right? So those thoughts become huge knots in our head. And what a good coach does is not just helps you untangle those knots, but the coach takes you higher
Wow.
and makes you lighter, right? Um, Untangling a therapist can do, but a coach does goes beyond that. So back to the model, clarity. The second cornerstone of the model, it's a 4C plus model, is consciousness, right?
Wow.
Another word, self-awareness. You need to know yourself, and as a good coach, you need to help the coachee get to know himself or herself.
Yep.
The third piece is really, you know, you have to think about uh, confidence. And I talk a lot about confidence, especially in regard to women leaders, because it's not competence often, it's not capability that's ever in doubt. It's
Mm,
our own belief in
mm,
our ability. Much like my Middle East M&A engagement, I wasn't sure I was up for it. And I was nervous. I thought just because he liked me or because they know me, they've given me the assignment. And what if I really mess it up?
right.
And I know it's true for everybody. And it doesn't matter if it's Ruchira or it's Sheryl Sandberg. I know we all go through that, right? We read about it. So confidence. And the last piece is capability. Honestly, if you do not become more capable uh, in the 6 months or a year when you start getting coached, then the coaching's not working. And for me, these four cornerstones are key to your
Wow.
understanding of what good coaching is. And organizations that get this right ensure that they build a culture of coaching. So that's the last cornerstone. And what I mean by that is you build an environment or an ecosystem where it's okay to give feedback and receive feedback. So, i.e., give feedback to your people, but you should be open to receiving that too from your peers and from those that report to you, work with you, your colleagues. So, yeah, I've lost
Wow.
the train. So I've talked about the model. Yeah. So back to the chemistry. Yes. So one is that I make it a point to let the individual know that this is what you should expect from our sessions. And I want him or her to be really comfortable that they're open and they have to be vulnerable. But if they don't feel that they can be that way with me, then the coaching is pretty meaningless, to be honest.
Wow. Wow. That, I mean, that's astounding. And I love the analogy of the knot. I was just thinking about, here in the US, we're, and I know we celebrate around the world, but we're getting closer to Christmas and people will pull out Christmas lights. And, often there's just that knot. And for whatever reason, sometimes I just want to pull tighter and it makes the knot worse. And I was just thinking about listening to your analogy, thinking about the coaches in my life who've helped me. Okay, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. Don't pull tighter. There's a way to
Right.
get this undone.
Yeah.
Have you
I
seen?
really, yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was going to ask. Have you seen? Is a leadership challenges different? I mean, you've worked across different places in the world. Asia and the Middle East and North, and all over the place. Or is across the board? Are the challenges pretty much the same what leaders are facing, or does it differ on the place of the globe that we're at?
The challenges are definitely the same, but what
Hmm.
does differ is how they coach and build others. And that's because you have to take the cultural nuance into play, right? The Western society where you're from and where you're based has always been a highly individualistic society. And terms like coaching, etc., have been around much longer. We give people the space, we let people think. And that's also how kids grow up, in households, they just are a lot more independent.
Yeah.
When you look at Asia, Asia is not a homogeneous cluster. You can't say Singapore and India or Vietnam or or Japan. They are very different from each other, right?
Mm,
In some sort of countries, take Japan for instance, there's a lot of reverence to your boss. Korea, Japan, you look up to them. So the expect. I mean, let alone the boss trying to coach you. I think people people feel intimidated when somebody's coaching because they want to go to their bosses and they want to get those answers. They don't want to be put in a corner and be told, "What do you think about it?" Because it's very alien to them, right?
yep.
So leaders have to customize their style based on the cultural nuance. In India, again, not to stereotype, but again, oftentimes there is coaching, but then it can also be we also have very assertive bosses who know it all.
Mm,
So we have to find that right balance between being directive, being nurturing, being empathetic, being you know being a teacher. That's what good leadership is. So how they slice and dice this is a function of the culture that you're in, right? So
wow.
Asia, Middle East, yeah. So
Wow.
similar.
Yes. I love that. Oh, I love, you talked earlier about your son and watching Kung Fu Panda. Our youngest, we have older kids in their young 20s, and then our youngest is 10 years old.
Wow.
And we actually adopted him from China, and he hasn't been all that interested in Chinese culture, and so we've been talking about it. But he started watching Kung Fu Panda, and this has brought up questions and ideas, and it's really fascinating. I even thinking because I've now he's watched it many times, and so we've heard it and seen it. But even from the outside, I love what coaching can do, especially as the example in that movie. The most least likely, unlikely person, you know,
Exactly.
with the right resources, the right people believing in them. And I love and that's why your book is so incredibly important. As I coach leaders, it just seems to be this so often this middle manager line where if we can help middle managers understand, they've got to step away from, they were used to doing the hands-on job and now they've got to step away and raise up other people to do it and do it better and to succeed at a new level. And that's why, I think what you do and your voice in the world is so incredibly important. And I
Thank you.
want to try to get your book into as many hands as possible because that coaching is just so important.
Thank you. I this to me, I'm very passionate about it, and to me, as I said to you earlier, when Penguin commissioned the book, and as I was telling you, my long-winded life story, my brief was write a book for the aspiring manager or a young manager.
Yes.
But when I started to decode it and do all the research, and I'm a, as I say, a para academic. We do a lot of academic research. I went back to my editor and I said, I don't agree, because coaching doesn't have to be a book for a corporate leader. You
Mm,
could be a young manager. You could be someone who's has teams, big teams, but you could have been around the block. You could be anybody
yep.
you want to be. You have to think of coaching as a life skill. And the whole premise of coaching, as I said earlier, is asking, not telling. So if take my own story, and I write about myself a lot in the book, and I think that's what's made it a bit of a breezy read. There's a lot of humor in there. There's me, much as I just like I'm talking to you. I write, so I'm not very formal in my writing. But so I guess as a consultant who's been at the periphery of the organization, who
Hmm.
gets hired because of her expertise in transformation, change, org design, etc., or building human capital, I'm not reporting into somebody. I have clients. These clients become great friends of mine, like Qatar Telecom, and often they give me a seat at the table. But remember, when I walk into that organization, if I simply told people what to do, because I know it all, because I've been hired as an expert, where would that lead be? If, on the other hand, I used a more asking versus telling approach, if I ask the right questions, if I made people believe that yes, you have all the institutional knowledge, I don't know the domain as well as you do. This is your
Mm,
world. I do know is maybe a thing or two about org design or transformation or change. But in order to sort of, I need to leverage their intelligence. I need to leverage their support to be successful. And so when you lead by impact and influence, That's also coaching. And
Wow.
I think everybody needs to, anybody who works with people should embrace it, right? Regardless of
Yes.
how many people report into you or whether you have these hard line versus matrix structures in organizations.
Wow. Wow. Just amazing. I can't thank you enough. I could probably sit here for another hour with another another list of questions and
You're
um
being very kind. But thank you.
this is just amazing. Well, we've been building an online library for our listeners, and so I ask all of our guests a couple of questions, and we fill all those resources, and so it's just this incredible place for people to go. And so, for you, is there a speaker every time you hear them communicate, whether it's a TED talk or a YouTube video or their training, is there somebody that just kind of stands out and you can't wait to pass them on to somebody else for them to learn?
My choices are really biased. Okay. I
Okay.
have a role model and someone who's truly, truly leaned in, and that's Sheryl Sandberg. So obviously,
Mm,
I'll watch everything she does. And I'm a huge I'm a huge believer in her cause, and I'm a huge believer of her leadership style. So I watch
yes.
everything she does.
Yes.
I couldn't have asked for more. She's gone out of her way to promote the book and
Oh,
her blog and all the fabulous
incredible.
stuff that she said about the book. So yes, if that's one person who I would recommend, and because I also do a lot of work in the women's leadership
Yep.
arena, it's a cause that's very close to me. So I think
Yep.
philosophically we align. And I
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
So she's
If you are a podcast person, not everybody is, but if there's a podcast, either a guilty pleasure, it's just kind of
yeah.
fun for you, or there's development podcasts, is there
Yeah.
one that you would recommend?
I just yesterday I heard this and I really love the podcast. It's the HBR Idea Cast, and
Mm,
that this is a medical doctor called Mithu um, Saroni, and she writes about how to make your brain work more effectively. And
wow.
so I've realized, just as Penguin has kindly commissioned the next book, I've realized, much like my Kung Fu Panda example, a lot of my stories don't come from leadership books.
Mm,
They come from different worlds, different
yep.
genres. And I
Yep.
loved how she talked about how mornings are so important to our well-being, and how the best ideas come to us when we're walking, not
Wow.
sprinting.
Wow.
And so I was truly blown away. And I wrote to her on LinkedIn, and she was fabulous. And she wrote back instantly saying, why would I not want to connect with you? I love what you do. So I think we've got this little mutual admiration society going on. But I will seek her inputs for the next book. I truly enjoyed the podcast.
Wow. I love it. And then lastly, is there a book, that you would say, hey, as a
Yeah.
leader, you,
Yeah.
you've, you've got to read this?
Yeah. Give and Take, Adam Grant, all time
Oh,
favorite. Quoted him extensively, also wrote to him to write the blurb, and he was very gracious. He said he would, and then he just didn't have the time. But what I loved about him was he wrote back and he said,
mm,
I have not read your book. And he was honest about it, and that was enough for me. So I let
absolutely.
Cheryl have it. So I think I was in a better place. If she had not responded and he had said no, I would have been quite heartbroken. But yeah, I didn't want to say
Yes.
that to him.
I love
So
it. Well, tell our listeners where we can go find more about you and where we can get your book.
The book's on Amazon in every region, in every country. I have a website. It's my name, ruchirachaudhary.com. That also gives you links to where you buy the book. And I'm on LinkedIn. And I would love to connect with people. And if you have feedback about the book, if you have anything you want to say, ask. It would be a pleasure. I love connecting.
Well, goodness, we will put all of that in the show notes in our Facebook
Oh,
group and in our emails. And
thank
this was such an honor. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for so openly sharing your wisdom and so appreciate your time today.
you, Jeff. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you. our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.